Good morning, good morning, good morning. The time for convening has arrived. The Senate will come to order. At this time, I ask all unauthorized personnel to exit the chamber. I recognize the senator from the 27th for a reading of the journal.
Good morning, Mr. President. I would like to point out that the senator from the 28th is in the room, so I'm going to hand this off to him in just a second. But it was a great day to start the morning. I saw my friend, the senator from Cherokee and Fulton County on TV bright and early. Fantastic job to you this morning. Just want to point out to you, Mr. President, that today is opposite day. Speaking of the senator from Milton and Cherokee County, today's opposite day. Today's also National Irish Coffee Day. And today in 1870, I want to point out for the senator from the 47th that the soda fountain was patented by Gustavus Dowes. And with that, Mr. President, I will hand it off to the esteemed Rules Chairman after we announce the beautiful news that the journal has been read and found to be correct, and he will introduce our pages.
All right, before we start breaking the rules here, out of the chute, we don't have handoffs, so
Mr. President, I apologize.
The senator from the 28th here. Recognize the senator from the 28th.
I'm confused. Mr. President, we got a great lineup of pages today. Out of Atlanta, we got Tendakai Milwaukee Matanda. I say that right? All right. We got William Eccles out of Atlanta. We got Fuller Stoll out of Atlanta. We got Aishan Tagieva out of Marietta. We have Mirav Williams out of Loganville. Y'all give our pages a big round of applause. Mr. President, the journal has been read and found to be correct.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Pages, for being here today. We appreciate each and every one of you. We've had a pretty good page program going on this year. I understand it's been pretty full, so we appreciate all the young folks coming from all over the state to volunteer their time. So, is there objection to dispensing of the reading of the journal? Chair hears none. The reading of the journal is dispensed with. Is there objection to the confirmation of the journal? Chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. All senators who have bills and resolutions to introduce, please bring them to the Secretary's desk at this time. First, reading and references to Senate bills and resolutions.
Senate Bill 383 by Senators Eccles of the 49th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 5A of Chapter 8 of Title 48 of the OCGA relating to special district mass transportation sales and use tax so as to revise requirements for
Finance.
Senate Bill 384 by Senators Hickman of the 4th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 19 of Title 45 of the OCGA relating to labor practices relative to public officers and employees so as to provide for the development and administration of the state of Georgia
Insurance and labor.
Senate Bill 385 by Senator Williams of the 25th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 2 of Article 9 of Chapter 3 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to funding, donations, property, and scholarships with respect to the Georgia Military College.
Veterans.
Senate Bill 386 by Senators Dixon of the 45th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 50 of the OCGA relating to state government so as to authorize and provide
Economic development.
Senate Bill 387 by Senators Kirkpatrick of the 32nd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 5 of Chapter 5 of Title 40 of the OCGA relating to identification
Children
cards.
and family.
Senate Bill 388 by Senators Kirkpatrick of the 32nd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act providing for a homestead exemption for Cherokee County School District and ad valorem taxes for educational purposes.
State and local government.
Senate Bill 389 by Senators Payne of the 54th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 4 of Article 3 of Chapter 2 of Title 38 of the OCGA relating to rights, privileges, and prohibitions.
Insurance and labor.
Senate Bill 390 by Senators Walker of the 20th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to libraries.
Government oversight.
Senate Bill 391 by Senators Williams of the 25th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Titles 31, 36, and 44 of the OCGA relating to health, local government, and property.
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 392 by Senator Alvarez of the 56th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA.
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 393 by Senators Dixon of the 45th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act, Chapter 3 of Title 31 of the OCGA relating county
State
boards
and
of
local
health.
government general.
Senate Bill 394 by Senator Dixon of the 45th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 15 of Article 6 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to
Education and youth.
Senate Bill 395 by Senator Dixon of the 45th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 3 of Article 6.
Education and youth.
Senate Bill 396 by Senators Halpern of the 39th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 7 of Title 50 of the OCGA relating to
Economic
department.
development.
Senate Resolution 470 by Senator Hickman of the 4th and others, a resolution creating the Senate Study Committee on the Preservation of Georgia's Farmlands and for other purposes.
Agriculture.
Senate Resolution 471 by Senator Albers of the 56th and others, a resolution creating the Senate Study Committee on access.
Children and family.
Senate Resolution 474 by Senators Watson of the 1st and others, a resolution urging partnership among the Office of Child Advocate for protection of children.
Children and family.
Senate Resolution 476 by Senator Albers of the 56th and others, a resolution creating the Senate Study Committee on Artificial.
Science and technology.
That completes the order, Mr. President.
Secretary will read reports of standing committees.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Ethics has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation that Senate Bill 189 do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Burns of the 23rd District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Finance has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation that Senate Bill 340 do pass, Senate Bill 366 do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Huffstetler of the 52nd District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Higher Education has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation that House Bill 130 do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Hickman of the 4th District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation that House Bill 63 do pass by substitute, House Bill 279 do pass by substitute, House Bill 362 do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Walker of the 20th District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation that Senate Bill 352 do pass, Senate Bill 255 do pass, Senate Bill 41 do pass by committee substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Albers of the 56th District Chairman. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Secretary will read bills and resolutions for the second time.
Senate Bill 342 by Senator Robertson of the 29th and others, child abuse records, child abuse neglect, and registries authorized and disclosure. Senate Bill 354 by Senator Walker of the 20th and others, cosmetologists and barbers, persons performing certain limited responsibilities exempt from licensure. Senate Bill 355 by Senator Robertson of the 29th and others, elections and primaries, use of ranked choice voting prohibit. Senate Bill 358 by Senator Burns of the 23rd and others, State Election Board, remove the Secretary of State, authorize the board to investigate. Senate Resolution 465 by Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others, Senate Special Committee on Investigations create. That completes the order, Mr. President.
It is now time for the morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? Recognize the senator from the 33rd.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, y'all. I'm back. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senators from the 35th, 38th, 34, and number 5, and 42. Also, Mr. President, by the way, what was your number in college?
I wore number 29.
One more.
It was the one that you didn't see it on the field that much back when I played. So,
I got one more,
well,
sir.
you got a starting lineup, a basketball team that's missing here today. So you need to.
41. Add 41 to that.
All right, 41.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Without objection, senators from the 35th, 38th, 34, 5th, 22nd, and 41st will be excused. Recognize the senator from the 50th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 17th.
Without objection, the senator from the 17th is excused. Any other motions to excuse? Secretary will call the roll. Senators, signify your presence by voting the yay switch. Secretary will unlock the machine. It is now time for the morning devotion. All senators, please take your seats and cease all conversation. I would ask the doorkeepers to secure the chamber at this time. I'd like to recognize the good senator from the 32nd to lead us in our pledge and introduce our chaplain of the day. Senator?
Thank you, Mr. President. If you all would join me as we honor our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the Georgia flag. I pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag, to the principles for which it stands, wisdom, justice, moderation, and courage. Thank you. I want to introduce you to today Captain Leland Jones. Captain Jones serves proudly as a chaplain in the Georgia Army National Guard. In particular, he's the chaplain for the 265th Chemical Battalion within the 201st Brigade. He's also the chaplain for the Recruiting and Retention Battalion and serves as a member of the state's Critical Incident Team. His prior service enlistments include the U.S. Army Reserves and the U.S. Marine Corps. Chaplain Jones is the pastor of the Greater New Light Missionary Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. He's a graduate of Georgia State University and Luther Rice Seminary. Welcome, Chaplain Jones.
Thank you, ma'am. President Jones, Senator Kirkpatrick, who is serving well in honor in her uniform, and to those who are also the leadership of the Georgia Army and Air National Guard, and also select members of the State Defense Force. I say simply to you, welcome and good morning. A prayer will follow. Let these words rest upon each of you. If there was something to consider, the book of Deuteronomy, just a verse where Moses is leaving the scene, and he leaves with these words, and the Lord shall do unto them. But then he follows up with these beautiful announcements and says, and the Lord shall give them into your hands. But he says it with this beauty, be strong and of a good courage. Fear not, be not afraid of them, for the Lord thy God is with thee. And so I simply want to say to each one of you in your particular spaces, press on. We ask, oh God, that a word be given that might be bold, uplifting. Let us, dear Lord, also be collective and unifying the understanding that pressing on is something that needs to be done for us all. Press on. So Moses gives this real understanding that I am old. He actually says it in verses number 1 and 2. Don't get mad. I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. He says simply, I am gotten older, and I am old enough that I can tell you some things I've done where God has also told me. I won't go any further. But God gave me somebody in Joshua to pass the mantle on to. This is what he says in verses 1, 2, and 3. But also what he says in verse number 6 is that critical notion of what I want to share with you here today. He says, be strong and courageous. For those of you who are here, you are serving at a time when sometimes your service is not always appreciated. There are sometimes those who are your constituents might at the same time be the bane in the backside of your frustration. And even those who should say thank you sometimes would turn a blind eye and cross the street and never even acknowledge the service that you rendered. I don't say this to those of you who are only on the floor. There are some who are here in the gallery, and I see those with the Air and National Guard Army side. The reality is there are some who will say thank you for your service and yet want to curse the fact that you put on the uniform that you wear so that we can then have a differing set of opinions. We are the ones who support the laws that are put forward. But here today, I simply want to say, press on. In our discussion, as we're looking at Moses, these words are very brief. You're the ones who serve. And so I say, go and press on. I say go with, if nothing else, go with commitment. Believe it or not, you and we in uniform and the civilians who serve are the only few in society now who literally serve something bigger than themselves. You are the ones with commitment who actually strikes the oath. I believe it's Title 28-1-4, where it says, and you know these words, I do hereby solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of this state and of the United States, and on all questions and measures which may come before me, I will so conduct myself as will. Oh my goodness, we also in uniform serve from the same creed of understanding where we say, I support, defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Serve with commitment. That commitment you made when you first raised your right hand, let it be the same commitment that will guide you as you go forward to continue to serve. The second thing, very quickly, is to serve with honor. Serving with honor is something that I think is beginning to dissipate in our world today. Honor really does matter. Grown people understand that you are not only representing yourself, but you also came from somewhere. And generally there's a grandmother or a grandfather that says, you don't do anything in your life, but make this name mean something to those around you. My friends, serve with honor. Your position is honorable. We need you to continue to serve with honor and know how much we appreciate each and every one of you. And every once in a while, you'll get into those tizzies where people don't appreciate on one side or the other. Well, it was James Lane Allen who simply said that adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. You are here because you are already honorable men and women. Continue to do so and to serve this great state of Georgia. And then the last thing is serve with courage. It takes a strong leader to stand firm. It takes a strong leader to have a strong opinion on any point, one way or the other. Stand and be courageous. Stand and be strong. But also in the world today, being that you're the ones who literally are the truest of patriots. It was George Washington who said, guard against the imposture of pretended patriotism. You've sworn to do something awesome. And I say I'm so grateful that you're doing it. And we're here simply to say, press on. And so I say, press on. Your session is not over yet. Signing day, I'm sure, is right around the corner. But I say, press on. Whether you serve those who are the affluent areas or if you serve those who, like with Langston Hughes in the poem Mother to Son, where she said simply, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's been floors bare and we had no carpet on them. But she says, I still a climbing, honey, for life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Wherever you are with whomever you serve them boldly, serve them with commitment, serve them with honor, serve them with courage. And whatever you do, please do not quit. Edgar Guest made it quickly, boldly, and also definitively clear when he says, when things go wrong as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, when you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. I say to each and every one of you in this Senate House, continue doing what you're doing. And we simply wanted to say today, press on. So continue to negotiate. Press on. Continue to kiss the babies. Press on. Continue to shake hands. Press on. Continue to pat them on the back. Press on. And simply know, be strong, be courageous. Your God's got you. We appreciate you. And today in the Georgia National Guard, we just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for your service. 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 Press on. Press on, press on. Thank you for your service. Press on. Thank you for your service. And now I offer a word of prayer in my faith tradition. You do the same in yours. Oh God, bless these leaders to continue to lead, protect them, provide for them. But at the same time, let them know how special they are to the running of our state and to making Georgia be the exemplary state that it is. Because the people in this room know how to get work done. This I pray, oh God, for God and country. Amen. Press on.
All right. Well, if that message didn't get your blood flowing, I don't know what will. I'll let you all go see the senator from the 25th, our undertaker here in the room. So that was good. We appreciate that, Chaplain Jones. Always love introducing our doctors of the day, the physicians that come down here and volunteer their time and services. We greatly appreciate them, and I'd like to recognize the senator from the 52nd to introduce our doctor of the day. Senator.
Thank you, Governor. We have with us today the bio says J. Michael Ware. Mike Ware and I grew up in Rome about the same time. Matter of fact, our dads both were friendly competitors in the heat and air conditioning business, so Tucker, the lobbyist, tells me I got to call that conditioned air now, so I'll try to do that right. But we both were toting Freon tanks for our daddies years ago. I'm not sure why he didn't stay in the business. With me, it was those snakes under the houses. I didn't like them too well. But we both went out. He went to the county school. I went to the city school same time. He went to Georgia Tech. I went to Georgia. But then Dr. Ware went on to Emory School of Medicine, and then he went to the Vanderbilt School for his residency in internal medicine and came back to Emory for a fellowship in cardiovascular disease, and has been an interventional cardiologist at the hospital I've worked at a lot longer than I've been up there. It's one of the 3 level 1 emergency hospitals in the state. So when we talked about the Undertaker Center, he got one of those life-saving stents in the last year on that LAD, I know. And he's there for when they bring in by ambulance or by car, or they fly them in, the emergency hearts. He's there waiting on them. I can tell you, when he's not there, you're probably going to find him on his tractor. Good doctor up there and a good friend in Rome, Dr. Michael Ware.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you having me. Being unfamiliar with your proceedings, I must say that the young lady speaks faster than any Georgian I've ever been around. That's a talent. But yes, I'm remiss. This is my first trip to the Capitol building, and I'm just blown away. Everything is so nice and beautiful, and the architecture is great. It's a pleasure to be able to be here to provide these services this morning, and thank you all so much.
All right. Before we recognize our scheduled a special guest today, I want to recognize one of our former members here. We got Senator Judson Hill here, everybody. Why don't y'all give Senator Judson Hill? Senator Hill served many, many years here in this body, and he's a good man, and I served with him for a little while in the Senate, and he's a good man, and always was a good friend to me, and a good member of this body. So we appreciate having you here, Senator. All right, as y'all can see, we've got some special guests here, and I am happy to have our Georgia National Guard here today. And let's give them a round of applause here. They had a very fine message from Captain Jones today, and it's probably y'all were lucky, because that's probably one of the most inspiring talks we've heard in quite some time in this body. So, but I'd like to recognize once again the senator from the 32nd to introduce our special guest. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. And before I make my remarks, I'd like to ask all the veterans in the chamber to come and stand with us up here. So, fellow senators, you may have noticed some people in uniform at the Capitol today, not just people on the podium, but also the people along the side over here. And in the gallery, we've got soldiers and airmen with us today, which is a great honor. I'm proud to serve in the Georgia State Defense Force in the 132nd Medical Unit of the volunteer unit that supports the National Guard. And what the President of the Senate did not tell you is that former Senator Hill, wherever he went, is also in the Georgia State Defense Force. He just didn't wear his uniform today. I want to introduce our guests back here. We've got Major General Tom Carden. We've got Colonel Dirk Dobby from the Defense Force. Chief Master Sergeant Linda Washington from the Georgia Air Guard. We've got Command Sergeant Major John Ballinger from the Army National Guard. And we've got Deputy AG Joe Ferrero. Thank you very much for being with us today. The Georgia Department of Defense consists of 15,000 members, 11,000 Army National Guard, 2,900 Air National Guard, 500 State Defense Force, and 500 federal and state civilians. Deployed across the world performing missions from Southwest border security to peacekeeping missions in Kosovo and the Middle East, the Guard is deployed around the world. The State Defense Force is deployed within the state for disaster relief and other missions. Major General Carden enlisted in the Army National Guard in 1986. He was commissioned in 1989 as a second lieutenant. He's led troops deployed from Kosovo to Iraq. He rose to serve as the commanding general of the Georgia Army National Guard, and immediately prior to his appointment as adjutant general in 2019, he served as the deputy commanding general of the NATO Multinational Division Southeast, Romania. Please welcome Georgia's Adjutant General Tom Carden, and we have a resolution for them that perhaps we could read.
Senate Resolution 439, a resolution by Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd and others, recognizing January 25th, 2024 as National Guard Day at the state capitol and for other purposes. Whereas the Georgia Department of Defense provides ready and relevant military forces to the governor to respond to state emergencies and to combatant commanders to defend our nation. And whereas the Georgia Department of Defense consists of more than 15,000 members, including 11,000 Army National Guard soldiers, 2,900 Air National Guard Air Guardmen, 400 State Defense Force volunteers, and 500 state employees. And whereas from 1733 to 2023, the Georgia National Guard has continued the tradition of selfless service from the first citizens muster by Lord James Oglethorpe through service in 2 world wars, Korea, Vietnam, and the global war on terror, safeguarding citizens of foreign nations while preserving the freedoms cherished by the citizens of the United States of America. And whereas the selfless and heroic actions of the Georgia National Guard stand as an example of service to state and nation, which makes it fitting and proper that the outstanding accomplishments of these remarkable and distinguished Georgians be appropriately recognized. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize January 25th, 2024 as National Guard Day at the state capitol and commend the men and women of Georgia National Guard for their strength, leadership, courage, and selfless service. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I'd like to call on the Major General to say a few words to us.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Jones, Senator Kirkpatrick, distinguished members of the Georgia State Senate. And we're just honored and humbled to be in the chamber today to represent the 15,000 men and women that serve in your National Guard. We're absolutely committed to our important missions right here at home and abroad. And I got to say, I want to thank Chaplain Jones. I don't know how many of you were here to hear his message earlier, but I grew up in a little church down in southwest Georgia, and our preacher used to say, if I don't light your fire, you got wet kindling. So Yeah, if you heard that message, you're not ready to run through a wall and get it done, then I don't know what to tell you. So thank you, Chaplain Jones. Certainly appreciate your message today. You know, our portfolio of responsibility in the Georgia National Guard actually starts in the 5th grade, teaching science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to 5th graders. We go on from there to give a much-needed second chance to 16 and 18-year-old at-risk high school students through our Youth Challenge and Job Challenge programs. Notice I didn't say Youth Easy program. We call it the Youth Challenge program for a reason, but we've actually graduated a little more than 19,000 young men and women through that program since its inception, and I can't tell you how proud I am of those state employees that run that program for the Georgia National Guard. The sun never sets on your National Guard. This year has been no different. In the next few months, we'll complete the deployment of more than 2,100 service members, as Senator Kirkpatrick mentioned earlier, from our southwest border right here in the United States to locations from the Sinai Peninsula, the Middle East, and Kosovo, just to name a few. When you consider the requirements in addition to our state partnerships with the countries of Georgia and Argentina, you will see that your Georgia National Guard remains more relevant and engaged than ever before. We have service members from every county in the state of Georgia. In addition to the missions we complete at home and abroad, your National Guard has an economic impact in the state of Georgia of over $1.1 billion annually. None of this would be possible without you, without your support, without your leadership. Today's called National Guard Day at the Capitol, but as I briefed our troops on earlier that came here, and many of whom are in the gallery with us today, really the day is the day for the National Guard to come here and thank you for what you do every day. The work you do in this chamber literally bends the mathematical odds in favor of us going to get our mission done and bringing everybody home safe. We couldn't be more honored to be here to thank you, to thank your veteran members of the Georgia State Senate, right, who stood in the gap between freedom and tyranny. Evil never takes a day off, and your Georgia National Guard is going to do everything that we can to follow the example that you all have set to make sure that evil never comes to your door or the doors of your neighbors. May God bless you, the state of Georgia, and the United States of America. Thank you for having us.
We've got another special guest here today, another former member here. Back there in the back, we've got Senator Fran Millar back there. Give him a round of applause. I got another good friend of mine here that is one of our guests here today. Somebody that has been familiar with this body. Brought him down here a few years ago when he was starting his foundation, the Magic. Excuse me, real quick. The Magic Foundation is my great friend Malcolm Mitchell, who's from Valdosta, Georgia, but for you UGA people, that name might sound familiar. He was an outstanding star at the University of Georgia, went on to play for the New England Patriots, played in the Super Bowl game against the Atlanta Falcons, and as he will say, you know, he couldn't help it because they spotted him 25 points at halftime, so. But Malcolm, ever since his football career, has made it a passion to teach young kids how to read. And he started a foundation, and he and I have been working together on some projects. He's getting involved with our Georgia literacy program, and I just want to allow, number one, I want to give him a big round of applause, and I want to give him a warm welcome, because he's working closely with our chairman of education here from Statesboro, and it really has become a real passion of theirs, and they're doing great things about making literacy a top priority for our state, and we want to continue to work with he and his foundation on that. So I'm going to call the senator from the 4th to do the formal introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is an honor to introduce my friend Malcolm Mitchell to y'all. Many of y'all have met him in the past, and Malcolm's not here today because of football. He was a great football player, but he's here because of literacy and children reading. I wish that Georgia had listened to Malcolm Mitchell in 2016 when he organized Share the Magic Foundation. Malcolm knew at that time that our children in Georgia could not read, and they were not reading on grade level. We all became very embarrassed in 2023 when these statistics became very well known across the state of Georgia, but we didn't slow down. We passed Senate Bill 211, which created the Literacy Council, and we also passed House Bill 538, which brought phonics back to school. We thank you, everyone in this Senate and in the House, for doing that. And we have got a resolution now honoring Malcolm's literacy efforts, and I want to read that, give this to you, Malcolm, but let me read it. Let me read this to you, read it to everyone. Recognizing and commending Malcolm Mitchell and for other purposes, whereas Malcolm Mitchell, a native of Valdosta, Georgia, has been recognized as the national captain of the All-State Good Works team as a result of his frequent visits to elementary schools to read to students and his love for literacy, and whereas Malcolm Mitchell has authored several children's books, 2 of which led to him being awarded the title of Children's Author of the Year by the Georgia Writers Association in 2016 and 19, and he has signed a 3-book contract with Scholastic Publishing Company, and whereas Malcolm Mitchell's love for literacy prompted him to create the Read with Malcolm Youth Literacy Initiative in 2015 and Share the Magic Foundation in 2016, with the purpose of transforming children's lives through literacy and inspiring young people to read through providing students in Title I schools with book ownership. And whereas since the founding of Share the Magic Foundation, it has given books to over 150,000 young readers, and 88% of the money that goes to this foundation is used directly for the literacy efforts, are used directly to support youth literacy in unserved communities, and this initiative has led to increased reading minutes, readers being empowered to strive for success, and more students passing accelerated reading tests. And whereas the Reading with Malcolm initiative has been in school programs that provide children with copies of Malcolm Mitchell's books and lesson plans for teachers and pep rallies to raise morale, as well as virtual programs that encourage reading endurance and help mitigate the learning loss that occurs during summer break, and participants in the program have collectively read over 284 million minutes, both in and outside the classroom. And whereas Malcolm Mitchell has been named by the University of Georgia as one of the school's top 40 under 40 for his literacy efforts, was honored as the 20th anniversary of the President's Summit for American Future, and received a Promise Hero Award from Colin Powell for his contributions to American youth. His contribution to individuals who struggle with dyslexia and other related reading struggles led him to being the recipient of the Pinnacle Award from the International Dyslexia Association, and he now serves as CEO of the Share the Magic Foundation and has been appointed to the Georgia Council on Literacy as a result of his literacy initiative. Whereas Malcolm Mitchell's story has been told in many schools in order to encourage students to embrace the importance of reading and to encourage more young Americans to read. Now therefore, be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend Malcolm Mitchell for his many efforts to promote literacy. Be it further resolved that the Secretary of the Senate is authorized to and directed to make an appropriate copy of this resolution available for distribution to Malcolm Mitchell. Let me introduce to y'all Malcolm Mitchell.
Good morning, Senator Billy Hickman, thank you. Joanne, thank you as well. Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, I appreciate you as well, my friend. Growing up in Valdosta, Georgia, I was under the conviction that football was the only way for me to live a meaningful life. I was incorrect. I have learned through education, through reading, that I can empower my future to become a productive member of this society. Now, the truth is, less than 40% of our students are reading on grade level by third grade. That means they have an increased likelihood of interacting with the criminal justice system. That means they're more likely to need government assistance programs. And that means they have a decrease in their life expectancy. Literacy rates impact every area of life. And I am saying I am committed to that no longer being the outcome in the state of Georgia, that we get our kids reading on grade level so they can become productive members of society and enter the workforce to continue to make this one of the greatest states to live. I hope you're willing to join me. I appreciate your time this morning. And as I always like to say, let's keep reading. Thank you all.
Are there any unanimous consents? Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? I recognize the senator from the 54th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Friends, I rise today for two purposes, as to acknowledge two things. Number one, that freedom is not free, and to bring light to the cost. When I left the 504th Infantry Regiment of the 82nd Airborne Division, I never forgot the day I left at 23 years old, newly married, coming back to Georgia with my new wife, that another 18-year-old kid stepped in my spot. And I never forgot that while I'm standing at this podium and we're sitting in this chamber today, there's a young man or a young woman standing on a wall in a really dark and dangerous region of the world in the middle of the night. And that he or she's already come to terms with in the middle of the night, there could be a sniper's rifle on me right now and I wouldn't know it. Yet he or she still stands there. And I like to tell people, if you really want to know what freedom is, go find that 18-year-old kid and ask him why. Why are you still standing here knowing there could be a sniper's rifle on you at this moment? It goes down to what I said a few days ago. It's the hope of freedom. That young man or young woman left their want of freedom long behind. So that's why I rise today, is to bring light. Because this past week, our nation lost two amazing young men, two of our best, just from the position that they held. This week we lost Nathan Gage Ingram and Christopher J. Chambers. And both of these men served in the U.S. Navy SEALs Team 3, and both died this week. And though their names may never be remembered by society, I knew that today I needed to come to this well and breathe those names so that this room would hear and remember those two names. I'll read you the story. It says, under the darkness of night and the rolling high seas off the coast of Somalia, members of the U.S. Navy SEALs Team 3 began to climb aboard an unflagged ship that was carrying illicit Iranian-made weapons. As Navy Specialist Warfare Operator, Second Class Nathan Gage Ingram began climbing the ladder into the boat. He slipped, falling into the gap the waves had created between the vessel of the SEALs combatant craft and the ship. As he went under, U.S. Navy Specialist Warfare Operator First Class Christopher J. Chambers jumped into the gap to try to save him. It was an instinctive act, honored by years of training, one teammate going to another's aid, but weighed down by the body armor, weapons, and heavy equipment, the two SEALs plunged into the depths of the Iranian Sea and died. So, Mr. President, I would just ask for a moment of silence that we remember these two heroes.
Please rise while the senators ask for a moment of silence.
Who gave their lives so that we could all stand in this room today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Does any other senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? You have before you a consent calendar of privilege resolutions. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? Is there objection to the adoption of the resolutions on the consent calendar? Chair hears none. The resolution on the consent calendar are adopted. Wait a second. Let me get done with this. Recognize the senator from the 56th for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask unanimous consent that Senate Bill 359 be withdrawn from the general calendar and be committed back to the Committee on Judiciary.
Senator from the 56th has asked for unanimous consent on SB 359 to be withdrawn from the general calendar and recommitted to Judiciary. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 359, a bill by Senator Albers of the 56th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 1614.3 of the OCGA relating to definitions under the Georgia RICO Act, so as to amend the definition of pattern of racketeering activity to include felonies and certain misdemeanors which meet criteria for the imposition of enhanced penalties and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Recognize the senator from the 56th to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the Judiciary Committee members and specifically the chairman from the senator from the 17th. We are going to work on this bill and adopt some of the similar language that Florida and other states have done that I think will be a better consensus to make sure that we are implementing further protections against anti-Semitism and the people who are continuing to push hate and terrorizing our citizens, because we will always stand behind our citizens and make sure that they are freedom-loving people that can feel safe in their homes and in their businesses. Thank you. I yield the will.
Is there objection to the senator from the 56th motion? Without objection, the bill is recommitted. All right, we've got a number of special orders here that we've got to take up before we can get to the rules calendar. One being confirmation of the JQC, the governor's nominees here. So. Secretary, read the committee report.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Assignments has had under consideration the following appointments to the Judicial Qualifications Commission. Honorable Bob Barr, appointed by the Governor. Mr. Stephen S. Green, appointed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Honorable Victoria S. Darrisaw, appointed by the Supreme Court of Georgia, and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation: that the appointment be confirmed as submitted. Respectfully submitted, Senator Honorable Burt Jones, Chairman. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Recognize the majority leader for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to allow for the confirmation of the appointments of Mr. Bob Barr, Mr. Stephen S. Green, and Ms. Victoria S. Darrisaw to the Judicial Qualifications Commission be confirmed by one roll call vote.
Majority leader has moved. Is there objection? We have an objection. You're asking for a separate vote, Senator? Want to grab you? I recognize the senator from the 29th.
Yes, Mr. President. I respectfully request that Mr. Barr, the vote on Mr. Barr, be separated from the vote on Mr. Green and the Honorable Darrisaw.
Senator has requested that one be removed from the list. Is there objection to that? Without objection, we'll set the nomination of Mr. Barr to the side and vote on it separately. So. Recognize majority leaders. Speak to the motion.
Motion number 2.
All those in favor of Senator, you need to make a motion to confirm them now.
I'm prepared to make a motion.
All
Mr.
right.
President, I move that the appointments of Mr. Stephen S. Green and Ms. Victoria S. Darrisaw to the Judicial Qualifications Commission be confirmed.
Would you like to speak to the motion, Senator? Any other senators wish to speak for or against the motion? All right, the majority leader has moved that we affirm Mr. Green, Mr. Darrisaw, and those who are in favor of that will vote yea. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the confirmation of the nominees, the yeas are 50 and the nays are 0, and these two are confirmed. Recognize the majority leader for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the appointment of Mr. Bob Barr to the Judicial Qualifications Commission be confirmed at this time.
All right. The majority leader has made a motion to confirm Bob Barr to the committee. Would you wish to speak on behalf of that? Is there objection to that motion? There's objection from the senator from the 29th. Would you like to speak on that, Senator? You wave. He waves. So anyone else? Would any other senator like to rise and speak on this, for or against it? Hearing none, all those in favor of confirming Mr. Barr to the committee will vote yea. All those opposed, nay. You want to speak? I recognize the senator from the 6th. What purpose do you rise?
Unanimous consent to excuse 2 senators. The senator from the 15th and the 22nd.
The 20 what, I'm sorry?
The 22nd.
22nd. Without objection, senators from the 15th and the 22nd would be excused. All right, the majority leader has made a motion. All those in favor of the motion will vote yea. All those opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On all the days that have technical difficulties, here's the day. The yeas are 29, the nays are 20, and Mr. Barr is confirmed. We're now moving on to the rules calendar, starting with SR 443. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Resolution 443, a resolution by Senator Kennedy of the 18th and others. A resolution appointing Rick Jeffries to the State Election Board and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Rules recommends that this resolution do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Brass of the 28th District Chairman. That completes the order, Mr. President.
I recognize Pro Tem to speak to the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I rise today to recognize former state senator, our colleague Rick Jeffries, for his nomination to the State Election Board. Senator Rick Jeffries was first elected to the State Senate from Georgia's 17th District in 2010. Senator Jeffries is a successful businessman, and he is currently the owner of J&T Environmental Services and a project manager for G. Ben Turnip Seed Engineers. Senator Jeffries brought an abundance of government experience to his Senate position when he served in this chamber, and he serves as city manager, previously served as city manager to the city of Locust Grove during the 2001 through the 2008 time period, and he served on the Board of Commissioners for Henry County during 2008 to 2010. I'm honored to have the opportunity to nominate Senator Jeffries to be the Senate choice to serve on the State Election Board. Most of you in this chamber know Senator Jeffries, know him to be a good businessman, a good family man, a very reasonable person, someone who's thoughtful, and someone who will represent us well on the State Election Board, and I would encourage your support for this resolution. Mr. President, I'm happy to answer any questions, or I'll yield the well.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? I appreciate the pro tem making that announcement. As many of you know, y'all that serve with Rick Jeffries, he's a good man from Henry County who's been involved in state and local government and small business owner himself, and I think a worthy candidate to serve on the elections board. So if there's no other questions or any other person would like to speak, Senator from the 6th, you have your light on? What purpose do you rise? You want to come here? Okay, you speak to the bill. Recognize Senator from the 6th. Speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to object to the nomination of the former senator to the State Elections Board. Giving an outspoken election denier power on the State Elections Board undermines the integrity of Georgia's elections. Let me be clear what I mean when I say an election denier. An election denier is a person who, despite all facts and all evidence, continued pushing dangerous, baseless conspiracy theories to undermine faith in the 2020 election. And further, based on their belief in those conspiracy theories, supported efforts to undermine the will of the people of Georgia. Let's take a look at the purpose of the State Election Board, which identifies its mission as being, quote, an important part of the election process. It is entrusted with a wide variety of responsibilities and authority regarding the protection of the precious right to cast a ballot, end quote. The board further states that, quote, voting is an essential and precious right. Those who choose to participate in the voting process do so because voting is something they value. Voting is the citizen's voice in their government, end quote. While we know that partisan officials sit on the State Election Board, it is nothing short of dangerous and irresponsible to empower conspiracy theorists on the board. Dangerous conspiracy theories about voter fraud will undermine Georgians' faith in our elections. People who think it is okay to overturn the will of the people, no matter the evidence, no matter the facts, no matter what courts have proven time and time again, do not deserve to be in positions of power. Colleagues, our goal with these nominations should be instilling Georgians with confidence in our elections. At the very least, that means candidates should respect the results of our elections, whether their candidate won or lost. This nominee has time and time again spread dangerous and baseless conspiracy theories. This nomination will only serve to further those theories and undermine the people's confidence in Georgia's elections. I therefore object to this nomination, and I yield the well. Thank you.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objections to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which is favorable to the adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor of the resolution will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the adoption of the resolution, the yeas are 32, the nays are 17. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. It is now time to take up the confirmation of the State Elections Board's chair. Secretary will read the message from the House.
Mr. President, the following message was received from the House through Mr. Riley, the clerk thereof. Mr. President, pursuant to House Resolution 806, previously adopted by the House and Senate, and OCGA Section 21230, the name of the Honorable John Fervier, having received a majority vote of the membership of the House of Representatives for election of Chairman of State Election Board, is hereby transmitted to the Senate for confirmation. That completes the order, Mr. President.
I recognize the majority leader speak to the motion.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. It's my honor to be here today to ask for your support of the actions that was just taken by the House. Back on January the 5th of this year, Governor Kemp announced the appointment to the State Elections Board to the position of chair of Mr. John Fervier. Mr. John Fervier is a gentleman from Ellijay, Georgia, which is my district that I represent back home. He was appointed by the governor to fill the vacancy that was created late last year in 2023. John has worked a career at the Waffle House, one of our favorite restaurants and places to go early in the morning or late at night. He worked there for over 35 years, and he currently serves as the Vice President of Risk Management and Security, overseeing the company's risk management, security efforts, and worker benefits. He also currently serves as the Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Georgia Subsequent Injury Trust Fund. He is a member of the Chairman's Advisory Council of the Georgia State Board of Workers' Compensation, and he's also Secretary and Treasurer on the Board of Directors for Kids Chance of Georgia, helping secure educational scholarships to children who have been victims of work-related incidents. Mr. Verbeer previously served as the chairman of the Georgia Self-Insurers Association. He received his undergraduate degree in mathematics from Berry College up in Rome, Georgia. Early in his career, he served in the U.S. Army as a signal company executive officer and a platoon leader. Today, he and his wife, Sarah, reside in Norcross, Georgia. We are grateful for John's service to our state throughout his career, and we look forward to his leadership on our state elections board, which is a very important job. I really appreciate the opportunity to present him to you today, and I ask for your favorable consideration for the nomination and the appointment to this board. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Senators yield. And Mr. Leader, I'll now recognize you for that motion.
Mr. President, I move that the election of Mr. John Verbeer as chairman of the State Elections Board be confirmed at this time.
Majority Leader has moved. Is there objection? Hearing none. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the confirmation of Mr. John Verbeer as chairman of the State Elections Board. All those in favor vote yea. All opposed nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. Well, it looks like everybody likes Waffle House. Except for one back there. On the confirmation, the yeas are 48, the nays are 1. This individual, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore approved. Recognize the Majority Leader.
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true there must be a lot of IHOPs in northwest Georgia? Obviously, the senator wouldn't have voted for that resolution.
He looks like he can put down a pancake or two. So. All right, moving on to the rules calendar. We've got HB 30. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 30, a bill by Representative Carson of the 46th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 50 of the OCGA relating to general provisions relative to state government, so as to provide for the definition of anti-Semitism and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Strickland of the 17th District Chairman. The Senate Judiciary Committee offers the following substitute to House Bill 30, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 50 of the OCGA relating to general provisions relative to state government, so as to require certain agencies to consider the definition of anti-Semitism provided for in this act in the enforcement of laws and regulations prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, or national origin, to provide for limitations and construction and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senator Merritt of the 9th has offered the following amendment number 1 to amend committee substitute to House Bill 30 by inserting at the end of line 22, criticism of Israel similar to that leveled against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. That completes the order, Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from the 18th, the pro tem, to speak to the to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Today, I bring you House Bill 30, a bill that would codify the internationally recognized definition of anti-Semitism and provide that definition as a guide for state and local agencies who are charged with enforcing Georgia's anti-discrimination laws. I'm going to share with you all why I'm up here today and why we've gotten here, and hopefully address some questions that might be on your mind as you have considered the substitute that we're bringing before you. You know, it occurred to me one day on my drive from Atlanta back to Macon that in between supporting our communities and engaging with each other in communities at events, we are sometimes called on not just to advocate for our constituents, but to fight for them as well. My friends, that is why I'm standing before you today. There is no higher calling in public service than to stand up for our communities, and especially those that are vulnerable to the forces of evil. Unfortunately, in many cases, we fight one another. We fight with words, and we fight with ideas. Our battles take place in this beautiful chamber here at the Gold Dome, where generations of our predecessors have done the same thing. Today, we have an opportunity to collectively fight, but not fight each other. Today, we can fight a pervasive and escalating threat in this state, and we can fight it together. Over the summer, we all witnessed anti-Semitic harassment and attacks occurring across this great state of ours. I saw in my own community where a hate-filled group of outside agitators, let me say that again, outside agitators, they were not from my home, but they came to Warner Robins and they came to Macon, and they distributed gross flyers carrying every trope of anti-Jewish sentiments. They left anti-Semitic packages and spread lewd and harassing materials. And most appalling of everything that these outside folks came and did in my community, this outside group hung a Jew in effigy by a noose outside of our local synagogue in Macon. All of these acts were targeted at my neighbors who just happened to be Jewish. It doesn't matter their religion. It doesn't matter their race. It doesn't matter where they come from. They are my neighbors. I know I'm not the only member of this esteemed body who had and saw similar disgusting acts occur to your neighbors and who have heard from your constituents on this very issue that we're addressing today. We've also seen anti-Semitism take on its most violent form on the world stage. The October 7th attack on the Jewish state and our ally by those who call not just for the destruction of Israel, but for the death of Jews around the world, highlighted the near nonstop threat that our Jewish brothers and sisters face. And while that may feel like a world away, the pain and the conflict hits close to home for many of us. During the committee meeting that we held earlier this week, we heard from Mr. David Lubin, whose daughter Rose was killed in Israel. Rose was a recent graduate of Dunwoody High School, and her family still lives here. I want to thank Mr. Rubin for coming to this committee that we had on Monday and sharing his family's story and for honoring the memory of his daughter Rose when he testified before the Judiciary Committee. Not only that, members of this chamber have heard firsthand accounts of the wanton destruction in Israel, but also the bravery of the Jewish people, from the senator from the 8th, who was in Israel at the time of the attack. I highlight that because, again, the attack feels far away, But when we see the tendrils of anti-Semitism grip our own communities, we know that it's not just far away. It's right here, friends. Speaking of constituents, I'm proud today to have Rabbi Elizabeth Bahar from Macon. She's a rabbi of Macon's Temple Beth Israel. She's in the gallery. She also had the courage to come Monday night to the Judiciary Committee meeting and share her story of the hatred that was witnessed in Macon. Hatred that made its way into her synagogue, her life, and yes, her home. She shared the story of her congregation's fears of coming to their temple to pray and exercise their religion. As I stated in committee, this is the antithesis of what our great state and this great nation is all about. Seeing the coverage of these acts and hearing directly from my constituents compelled me to take action. That's why I'm before you today. Shortly after these summer attacks, me and my office doubled down on the commitment to get HB 30 across the finish line. We worked with the House authors to perfect this bill and to address the concerns raised by the Judiciary members. I commend the efforts of this committee, and I commend the efforts of both the Republican and Democratic members of the Judiciary Committee who raised very thoughtful questions last year and whose thoughts and concerns were incorporated into the sub that you have before you today that ultimately resulted in the sub before you today having been voted out bipartisanly of the Judiciary Committee unanimously. I also want to thank James Beal of my office, who's worked for the last 5 months with various organizations across the spectrum. Friends, this bill comes to you extremely well vetted and very well thought out. Colleagues, we have the opportunity today to pass meaningful and effective legislation to curtail future anti-Semitic attacks. The president of this body joined in the chorus of those demanding that something be done to protect our neighbors, and I appreciate his leadership on this issue. With this legislation, we can affirm our commitment to promoting an environment where Georgians, all Georgians, regardless of their race, religion, or national origin, can live their lives free of fear of discrimination. Let me be clear, this legislation is not about stifling free speech, nor does it result in the government stopping from someone simply sharing their views. It is about safeguarding the dignity and the safety of our Jewish friends and neighbors, and most importantly, standing up to hate. Anti-Semitism presents a challenge in the very fabric of what our state stands for. And I feel it is our duty as elected leaders to confront this head on. Let us be the architects of a state that upholds the principles of wisdom, justice, moderation, and in this case, courage. So we need to speak as a legislative body, friends. This is our opportunity. This is our moment. This issue is before us. It is time. Let the voice of Georgia be heard that anti-Semitism is condemned and rejected. We can do that by the passage of the substitute that you have before you and that's being offered today. Join me, please, in voting for this bill. Together, let's fight for Georgia, all of Georgia, and thank you, Mr. President. I am honored to present this. I beg for your support and vote, and I'm happy to take any questions.
You do have a question, Senator. Recognize the senator from the 9th for a question.
Senator, do you yield?
I do.
I just want to clarify, because is it true we are adopting the IRA definition? Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to clarify, would it be true then if someone said Israel was a apartheid state, would that be considered anti-Semitic under the IRA definition?
No, it would not.
Okay. Is it true that in sections 7 and 10 of the examples of IRA would actually make that true, unintended?
No, Senator, it would not, and your question sets up a false premise because the use of the definition is simply there to give the state a guide in the event that facts are brought forward to a state agency or the state of Georgia where anti-Semitism has been alleged. If in fact that allegation is made, the question is, well, what is the definition of anti-Semitism, which is not codified? So it requires, so once that definition is then utilized as a lens to look at the facts, to make that determination, then the bill provides that the state shall consider the definition of anti-Semitism, the IRA definition, coupled with whatever the facts are of the acts that are also alleged to be illegal. Your premise of asking about simply making a comment about Israel doesn't contain a fact or an act that violates Georgia law.
Okay. Senator, do you yield?
Yes.
So we can agree that under the IRA definition, that if someone did say Israel was an apartheid state, that would not be considered anti-Semitic and no one would be breaking the law for that.
Again, Senator, your question creates a false premise. The definition, the IRA definition that is used, I think we all know, we've all read it, and it is what it is. You are then trying to couple that and spring over to and allege the use of that definition in the absence of any facts of which you haven't given of any other illegal activity. Okay. That's the problem.
Senator, do you yield?
Yes.
I guess my concern, or can we agree that I understand we're going to use facts in determining if someone is breaking the law.
Right.
But as written, if we're using the direct IRA definition, the section 7 and 10 would qualify under my question. And I guess the concern is it could be interpreted in a way that someone could be breaking the law. So that's my concern. I just want us to be very clear about how we're applying our definition.
And I understand and I appreciate the question. The problem is, Senator, and I appreciate the question, but we're still left without any suggestion of illegal activity. So none of this is triggered without that. Yeah, thank you.
Recognize the senator from the 5th.
Distinguished Senator, you have a question?
Yes.
Can you give an example of specific instances of anti-Semitic discrimination where prosecutors decline to charge under existing law but would charge under this definition, HB 30?
Yes, in fact, Senator, thank you for the question. We heard examples at the committee hearing on Monday night of where the absence of a definition rendered the law enforcement or the folks that would be utilizing otherwise an anti-Semitic definition, because it's not in the law, they couldn't charge it. And so those examples were given. You're asking me for a hypothetical, so it's kind of hard to answer that question, Senator.
Well, I'm not asking a hypothetical. I say, is there any specific example that you know of? You know, that's what my question was.
There was, well, again, I don't remember the specific ones that came before the committee, but the issue here, Senator, and the challenge and the problem that we're trying to solve is the lack of a definition. And without a definition, that which is hard to define or which we don't have a definition for is hard to defeat. And between the definition and defeating that kind of behavior is the inability of the state to have a definition that can then be used to say this is, by the law of Georgia, anti-Semitic behavior.
You have another question?
Sure.
For all the states that adopted IRA, how many of them have done so via statute as opposed to resolution or executive order? And how many of these bills were similar to this one?
It's my understanding that I think 33 states and dozens of countries have adopted this very definition, the IRA definition that is contained and referenced in this statute, this proposed bill.
So you're saying that 30-some states adopted as a statute, as a code?
They have adopted the IRA definition. Senator, whether or not it's been by executive order, by statute, or otherwise, 33 states recognize this as the definition of anti-Semitism.
Do you have one more question?
Sure.
Isn't it true that Trump administration in 2019 executive order adopting IRA states that Jews are already protected in school and all other federally funded programs under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act? Why do we need additional law if the one we have isn't being enforced properly?
Senator, I'm sorry, can you give me that again? I missed the first part of that question.
First part, isn't it true that the Trump administration 2019 executive order adopting IRA states that Jews are already protected in school and all other federally funded program under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act? Why do we need additional law if the one we have isn't being enforced properly? That's my question.
Senator, I guess two questions, Senator, two answers. The first is, as everyone in this room knows, we have a federal government and a state government. And what you're alluding to is what the federal government has done. We're here making laws for the state of Georgia, and we don't have a definition under Georgia law for anti-Semitism. And so the need is here because it references within the bill that you've read the application to and enforcement of Georgia law. The federal law would not have an applicability to this.
Can I ask you one more question?
Yes, sir.
Are there any other foreign countries that we protect in the code the same way we are protecting Israel here?
Senator, we're not protecting other foreign countries. We are protecting those of the Jewish community, wherever they may be, from anti-Semitic behavior and the violence that they are subjected to every day somewhere. But what we're concerned about here is what happens to them in Georgia, Senator, and that we don't have a definition that fully explains that the government can use to say, yes, that constitutes anti-Semitic behavior, and the government has an opportunity then to do something to stop it. Without that definition on the front end, they can't. And this is very much needed.
No further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You got a couple more questions, Senator. I recognize the senator from the 53rd.
Will the President Pro Tem yield?
I do. Thank you.
Senator, with the precedent that hate crimes legislation presents to us, should we not create a definition for every religion?
No, Senator, I don't think so. And part of that lies in the fact that this is part of the challenge of identifying anti-Semitic behavior. It's not, Senator, just religious-based. It's not just country-based. It's not just national origin-based. It's not just race-based. The Jewish community has had been increasingly vulnerable because we've not been able to sufficiently identify it, because the government actors who want to provide protection don't have that definition. And the community is unique because it's not just singularly religious-based. It's not just singularly nation or country-based. So, no, Senator, I think what we have here is very much needed. The time is now, and this is the right thing to do.
You got one more, Senator.
Yes, sir.
She just waved off. Senator, your light's on, but your light's still on, Senator. Okay, you have no further questions, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Look forward to speaking to you, friends, at the close of the debate on this. Thank you.
Recognize the senator from the 33rd. Speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President, my fellow senators, colleagues, friends, and y'all. As a member of the Georgia Senate Judiciary Committee, we work together as a team across the aisle with a unanimous vote to move forward legislation HB 30. Also, I, as a member of the Georgia Senate Judiciary Committee, work together with my colleagues across the aisle to pass the hate crime legislation HB 426. My brothers and sisters, these are two powerful steps moving Georgia forward, and As brothers and sisters, we have to remember that there's no place for hate anywhere in our land, whether it's Marietta or Cobb County. We must continue to be vanguards, leaders in promoting the least restrictive environment for all Georgians to experience life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I come here today to encourage that we continue to move forward in a positive manner and offer all of you, my brothers and sisters, my peace, my shalom, and Mr. President, I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. Recognize Senator from the 8th. Speak to the bill.
Colleagues, it's my honor to rise and speak in favor of House Bill 30. I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor, the President Pro Tem, and every member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, both Republican and Democrat, for supporting this important piece of legislation. Many of you know of my recent trip to Israel with my mom. We flew out on a Thursday, landed in Tel Aviv on a Friday, and the war broke out on Saturday. My mom had told me that this Holy Land trip would be the trip of a lifetime that she wanted to experience with me. Boy, was it ever the trip of a lifetime, just not in the way my dear mother had planned. I can never adequately thank the Israeli government, the people of Israel, or Renee Evans and the good people at the World Jewish Congress Center for the concern and priority they had for mine and my mother's safety. It was a pretty surreal experience to stand on my hotel room balcony at the Ambassador Hotel in Jerusalem and hear the Iron Dome rockets going off and the machine gun fire just a couple of 100 yards from where I stood. The sounds and images were much too close for comfort. I always joke with people that my life has been an illustration in Murphy's Law. If it can happen, it'll happen to Russ. Leave it to Russ and his mom to plan a Holy Land trip that coincides with the breakout of the largest war in 50 years in the country of Israel. The experiences I had and the things I saw have forever been imprinted into my conscience. I will be forever grateful to our tour guide, Fote, who stayed with us throughout the entire ordeal and did everything within his power to ensure our safety. Even with Hamas rockets landing 200 yards from his home, with his wife and children inside, he chose to remain by our side and did not leave us until he had made sure that we'd crossed over into Jordan. We had to flee through Jordan because the airport in Tel Aviv was shut down due to Hamas rockets, and even explored the idea of taking a boat to Cyprus in order to get out of the war zone. In times of crisis, you can become very close to someone in a short amount of time. This was indeed the case with our tour guide, Fote. Fote was a former IDF soldier, and as long as I draw the breath of life, I will owe him a debt I will never be able to repay. But as is the case with everything, we can all do something. I told Fote of the anti-Semitism bill currently being debated in the Georgia legislature. He spoke to me of how important legislation of this nature is, not only to the people of Israel, but to members of the Jewish community around the world. As we hugged and tears welled up in both our eyes at the Jordan-Israel border, he asked me to go home and help pass Georgia's anti-Semitism bill. This is me standing before you, my dear friends and colleagues, in the Georgia State Senate, attempting to honor the commitment I made to him that day, standing some 6,500 miles from the Georgia State Capitol. I hate to even say it because it sounds so egocentric for me to think that God had placed me, a rural South Georgia plowboy from the piney woods of Cogdale, Georgia, in Israel at such a time for a higher purpose. But my Christian faith has taught me that God doesn't make mistakes. Since my safe return, I have prayed and prayed about it, and the only reason I can come up with is the bill we're about to vote on today. I'll never forget one of the first calls I made when I got home was to my dear friends, the Lieutenant Governor and the Pro Tem. I told them both of my experiences and shared these thoughts with them that day. I was so happy when the Lieutenant Governor told me it was one of his priorities this session, and then again when the Pro Tem replied, "Russ, you don't know how much it warms my heart to hear you say that. I'm with you, brother." As a young child growing up on the farm, I was tasked with running a John Deere 2030 with a 12-row sprayer. If I went to spray a field with a lot of pigweed in it, my dad would always make me thoroughly wash the tractor off before I went into the next field. He had me perform that task religiously because he did not want to spread the pigweed seed to other fields and subsequently spread it across our entire farm. Just like those pigweed seeds, we cannot allow the seeds of anti-Semitism to spread and take root in our society. History has taught us a harsh lesson when we allow this to happen. The leaders of our grandparents' generation sat back and allowed the seeds of anti-Semitism to spread and take root all over the world until it was nearly too late. In the end, the pre-war leaders' failure to address anti-Semitism through appeasement eventually caused the deaths of over 420,000 Americans, 6 million European Jews, and nearly 60 million people worldwide. Passing this bill shows the world that we in the Georgia State Senate say never again. As a man and a public servant, I have always attempted to see things through others' eyes. My brother once helped me in this regard. As you all know, I'm a very proud American. I once called my older brother with righteous indignation when former Attorney General Eric Holder said, "Tell me whenever America was really all that great." Boy, was I fuming, because I believe, and still do to this day, that America is the greatest country on earth. But that day, I caught my brother as he was driving a tractor, and as I ranted and raved, I heard him idle the tractor down and then shut it off. He eventually cut me off and said, "Well, Russ, if you'd have been a black man born in Mississippi in 1940, would you think America had always been great?" Needless to say, it stopped me in my tracks and forced me to see things through a different lens. I ask you today, my colleagues, to stop and try to see current events through the lens of our Jewish population and the history of the Jewish people. With anti-Semitism on the rise around the world, Georgia, unfortunately, has seen a dramatic rise in anti-Semitic activity as well. I ask you to stop and see the world through the eyes of the Jewish college kid who sees "Kill the Jews" spray painted on his fraternity house walls. Stop and see the world through the eyes of the Jewish families who see protesters with Nazi flags marching in front of synagogues in Atlanta. As you look through their eyes, add the context of history, and the need to pass this bill becomes very clear. There's an image in my mind that I cannot get out. On my last day in Israel, the government had called up something like 60% of their reserves to defend their tiny nation. Their leaders had also pleaded with their civilian population to donate blood. As I was riding through a small Israeli town, I looked to my left, and I saw an RV-type bloodmobile placed into something akin to a town square. The line to donate blood was at least 100 yards long, with ordinary citizens waiting patiently in the Middle Eastern heat to do what they could by donating blood. So for them, for my friend Fote, and for all our Jewish friends in Georgia and around the world, I ask you to do what you can. And today, you can do what you can by voting to enter House Bill 30, Georgia's anti-Semitism bill, into the book of law. And to my dear friend Fote, wherever you are, I hope and pray that you and your family are safe. The people of Georgia stand with you, and it's my sincere prayer that my colleagues in the Georgia State Senate help me to fulfill the promise that I made to you that day by voting to pass House Bill 30. May God bless and keep you and yours, my friend. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Well said, Senator. Senators yielded the well. I recognize the senator from the 41st to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to take a moment today to acknowledge a world of both and. The belief that things can be both devastating for one people and unspeakably atrocious for another. That we can mourn the loss of both Israeli and Palestinian lives. That we can both condemn the unacceptable acts of anti-Semitism that are plaguing the Jewish community around our state and acknowledge that our citizens have the right to voice their dissent about the tremendous harm being enacted upon Palestinian civilians. Let me be clear. I stand unequivocally with the Jewish community here in Georgia and around the world, along with all of those who have experienced hate crimes and acts of violence, as I condemn all acts of anti-Semitism. I believe the Jewish community who has experienced great acts of violence deserves our support, compassion, and help. I mourn the devastating loss of Jewish lives at the hands of Hamas. To the entire Jewish community, I want you to know that I see you and I stand with you. And I also stand up for Palestinian lives. And I stand with those Jewish and non-Jewish voices that cry out for an end to the ravaging of an entire people. I stand with those who want protection from anti-Semitism, and with those living in the fear of the consequences that might come from speaking out against a government's actions. I refuse to accept this narrative that Jewish people who oppose this bill because of the wording that's in it, that they are not Jewish or that they are somehow less than those who support it. To all of my friends who oppose this bill, I want you to know that I see you and I stand with you. I will be voting no on HB 30 today, because I personally know what it is to be a minority voice within a minority group. I know what it is to have people who share my race, my ethnicity, and my religion, and they choose to ignore my voice. Choose to tell me that I'm not Christian enough or black enough because of my deeply held convictions that don't align with the loudest voices. There will be Jewish people here today who will say she doesn't understand, she doesn't get it. And I rise to admit that as a non-Jewish person, there are undeniably some things that I don't get. But what I do get, what I understand in the depths of my soul because of my own personal, deeply painful experiences, what I do understand is that minorities within minoritized communities have unique points of view that deserve to be protected. It's not a coincidence that the community of people who support my vote today are minorities within minorities. They are Jews of color, they are queer, they are trans, they are Palestinian, they are Muslim, they are people who have often been ostracized by their own communities. My vote today is evidence of the fact that I value all voices. So as I close, in this world of both and, I hold close all of those who experience hate and violence. And on this day in particular, I hold close my Jewish and Israeli friends as they process their grief. And I also hold close those who choose to bravely speak out against the perpetuation of violence on a people. I sit in despair, holding the hand of my Palestinian friends as they weep for their community, feeling alone and ignored as their friends and family are slaughtered. As I look around this world that is deeply divided, I pray for a world of less either or, and instead for a world with more both and. May God bless all of us and bring us peace. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Senator has yielded. Recognize the senator from the 55th, the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate and guests, I rise today to support HB 30. Anti-Semitism, often called the world's oldest hatred. It has plagued human history for centuries. This awful virus of prejudice and hatred has affected every country and nearly every people on earth. I join my colleagues today in making a first step to fight anti-Semitism in our beloved state. But before I go back to my seat to cast my vote, I want us to remember a few things. Georgia knows this oldest hatred well. Anti-Semitic horrors and atrocities form some of the saddest and most shameful moments of our history. Let's remember. Leo Frank was wrongly convicted of a murder of a little girl named Mary Fagan. At the urging of former Congressman Tom Watson, 28 anti-Semitic thugs kidnapped and lynched Frank, a man whose wrongful conviction occurred after a trial riddled with anti-Semitic stereotypes and deeply anti-Semitic media coverage. Let's remember the 1958 bombing of the Hebrew Benevolent Congregational Temple. At 3:30 a.m. on October 12, 1958, 50 sticks of dynamite blew that temple apart, striking fear in Atlanta's Jewish population. A person who called himself General Gordon of the Confederate Underground took credit. His motivation, the temple's senior rabbi supported the civil rights movement and the end of Jim Crow. His motivation. Hateful anti-Semites revived this hatred in recent years. Our Jewish friends have found swastikas carved into their windows, and disgusting and hateful anti-Semitic posters and flyers pasted in their neighborhoods, community centers, and places of worship around Georgia. Last year, I condemned this attempted intimidation of our Jewish brothers and sisters. Just like I said then, no human being deserves this treatment. Not a Jewish person, not a Muslim, not a Christian, not anybody. I also must acknowledge the anti-Semitism present since October 7th, 2023. I heard the disturbing chants. I watched college presidents refuse to say calls for genocide of Jewish people would violate student conduct policies. I've listened to misguided defenses of a terrorist organization that slaughtered parents in front of children and raped helpless women on October 7th. I watched the callous removal of missing posters that depicted victims of those attacks. And I watched as anti-Israel activists targeted Jewish businesses. Victims who were selected only because they were Jewish, not for any support or advocacy of Israel. Let me be clear. The poison of anti-Semitism affects the political left of our college campuses. This must end. As one of Georgia's political leaders, I'm doing everything I can to find an antidote to this poison made of resentment, prejudice, and hate. But anti-Semitism is not exclusive to one coalition or party. Anti-Semitism poisons us all, especially when our former president and the likely nominee of the Republican Party continues defending anti-Semites and giving them prominence and publicity. Our state and our country would never destroy this vile hatred when elected officials cannot find the courage to condemn Donald Trump's dehumanizing anti-Semitism and its brace of neo-Nazis. It gets harder and harder to get that word out of my mouth. Donald Trump has time and time again showed us his true colors. He refused to denounce David Duke, one of the world's most prominent anti-Semites and a former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. He refused to condemn men who marched the streets of Charlottesville chanting, "Jews will not replace us." Not only did he refuse to condemn them, he praised them. He called them very fine people. In 2022, Trump had dinner with Kanye West and Nick Fuentes, both anti-Semites. Fuentes, by the way, spends his time making videos that praise Adolf Hitler and spread Holocaust denial. Let me be clear on this issue too. Those who support and defend Donald Trump should never lecture anyone about anti-Semitism. You're throwing stones, but everybody in the world sees you living in a glass house. You aren't fooling anyone. I know some of my longtime allies may disagree with my vote today. To those people I say, I understand and respect your perspective. I thoughtfully considered your arguments, but I ultimately reached a different conclusion. Because hate is hate. An anti-Semite isn't just an anti-Semite. They also probably hate Muslims, black people, immigrants of all colors, and anyone else who doesn't look like them. Fighting anti-Semitism means fighting all forms of fighting all forms of dehumanization and hatred, period. Let me show you. Earlier today, I shared the story of Leo Frank's vicious lynching. Months later, inspired by that lynching, the Ku Klux Klan burned crosses atop Stone Mountain in a resurrection ceremony, telling the people of Georgia that they were back in business. Colleagues, let me tell you this. The Ku Klux Klan was not just harassing Jewish people. In 1958, the Temple bombing sent a message, and not just to our Jewish friends. It was a message to every black person in Georgia. Stop demanding the basic rights owed to you under the Constitution, or you will get hurt. These stories make my point. If you hate one group, you probably hate everyone else who is different. I have been discriminated against my whole life, both as a black person and a woman. And in every moment, black people or women ask for equality. The Jewish community stood hand in hand with us. They marched during the Civil Rights Movement, and they helped demand that women be treated like people. Today, I return their favor and stand with them. To destroy this poison of hate, we must all stand and fight together. The preacher we had this morning said, stand for something. And I say, for God's sake, just stand. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield well.
Senators yielded. Recognize the senator from the 9th. And please, we have a few more speakers right now, but just be mindful of your time limit.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's probably no surprise. I am here this morning speaking in opposition of HB 30. This bill has been dubbed the anti-Semitism bill, but in reality, it's the anti-speech bill. HB 30 claims to silence critical speech about the government of Israel and does nothing to prevent or protect Georgians from anti-Semitism. This body already addressed enhanced penalties for anti-Semitism and other forms of racism back in 2017 with the passage of the hate crime statute. HB 30 adds no greater effect or enforcement to our hate crime statute, and instead imposes silence on those who speak out against the actions of the Israeli government. HB 30 codifies a definition of anti-Semitism adopted by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, a collection of 32 member countries, including the United States, and it was aimed at educating and making recommendations regarding the international post-Holocaust issues. The definition was a working definition. It was supposed to be a working definition, not a non-binding definition that was never intended for legislative use. What's most concerning about the definition? It's associated examples that attempt to offer guidance about which actions are considered anti-Semitic. And according to the IRA examples, expressing criticisms of Israel's government and policies is considered anti-Semitic. And under HB 30, worthy of increased punishment. Discourse about Israel is not and should not be governed by the IRA definition. Here in this great state of Georgia, discourse is governed by the First Amendment that many in this body claim to believe in. And the First Amendment guarantees our rights as citizens to criticize any government, foreign and domestic. Does our Constitution not mean anything? Do our federal laws not mean anything? Does the guarantee of free speech in a country, in Georgia, mean nothing? I'm standing here telling you what to believe, and I'm not standing here telling you what to believe. I'm telling you that we have a right to express what we believe without threats of disproportionate punishment or losing our livelihoods. And that's what's happening. That's what this bill does. An innumerable number of college professors have already been reprimanded and suspended and terminated for criticizing Israel. Some of those professors right here in Georgia, and they're not just professors that are being criticized. It's countless student-led campus organizations. They have been completely shut down for expressing criticisms of Israel. Restricting speech that is government critical violates the First Amendment because it is directly based on content. The IRA example doesn't say that the general conversation about Israel or anti-Semitic, it says that the criticism specifically is anti-Semitic. This is a content-based restriction, and the United States Supreme Court has already ruled and affirmed time and time again that content-based restrictions on speech are unconstitutional. This is nothing more than an anti-democratic silencing speech that's critical of government. I understand that to some, speaking out against Israel is offensive and maybe even hateful. As unsettling as it may be, hate speech is protected under the First Amendment. I don't like it sometimes either. So codifying the IRA definition will not keep people from drawing swastikas or making disgusting statements about Jews. And voting against the IRA definition will not be a permission slip that allows offenders to skirt legal consequences. Georgia's hate crime statute protects us against that. What codifying the IRA definition will do is chill protected speech and restrict political discourse. What we're talking about is someone's expressing their political position one day, then later having that expression increase civil penalties or the length of incarceration for a later offense. Threatening to enhance legal punishment because someone criticizes a government is a textbook example of chilling speech. At the core of our country is the First Amendment guarantee of free expression, our rights to have our beliefs and express them more freely. This bill suppresses constitutionally protected speech and forces ideological conformity. For the preservation of our rights as Americans in Georgia, I ask that the members of this body vote no on HB 30. And Mr. President, I yield the will.
Senator, before you leave, would you like to speak to your amendment since?
Oh, yes. Can I get it? I have introduced an amendment. This amendment clearly just wants to fully clarify what criticisms are and are not. And it's just simply inserting criticisms of Israel similar to that levied against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. That is free speech. I am asking that you pass my amendment, and just making sure that we're not subjecting people to undue circumstances for expressing their rights and opinions and views in a political discourse. And with that, Mr. President, I'll yield the will.
Senators yielded the well. Recognize the senator from the 39th.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I've been married for 22 years now, and something that has always amused me since taking my husband's last name is that upon meeting me, some assume that I am Jewish, as Halpern is a common Jewish last name. And while I am not Jewish, I am proud of the Jewish heritage that is reflected in my name from my husband's paternal side. I grew up in New York and New Jersey as Sonia McLaughlin and was lucky to be raised by incredible parents who both attended HBCUs. Growing up and into my adulthood, I was also lucky to live in communities where there was a plethora of diversity. And while many of my friends have backgrounds similar to mine, I've always had close friendships with those who came from different backgrounds, including my Jewish peers, particularly with Jewish women. Women who have been my confidants, women who I trust, women who have shown up for me. I share this because today we are here to talk about issues that affect the Jewish community and people who I care about. And so before I speak about HB 30, I want to make some acknowledgments. There's a popular quote, I believe the author is unknown, that reads, "Surround yourself with people who fight for you in rooms you're not in." And so as we discuss HB 30 in this room, it is important to me to acknowledge that there is not a senator who is Jewish in this chamber, at least not for now. I've had many conversations with Jewish constituents, neighbors, and friends since October 7th, and I have been dismayed at the rise in anti-Semitic rhetoric, threats, imagery, and hate crimes that have taken place in our state and in our country. I have never, ever seen this level of anti-Semitism in my life. And so when I speak to Jewish men and women in Georgia, I acknowledge their pain, their fear, their grief, and their feelings of aloneness. The Jewish women in my life have confided in me that they have been made to feel othered and isolated at a time when they are deserving of support. So, Mr. President and Senate colleagues, I am here to offer my endorsement of HB 30 that adopts the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, so that public officials can recognize anti-Semitism and better define it. Jewish Americans, who make up about 2% of the population, endure approximately 60% of all religiously motivated hate crimes, per the FBI. Anti-Semitism has increased every year, and in 2022, anti-Semitic incidents increased by 63% in Georgia. Following the October Hamas terrorist attack on Israel, anti-Semitism has surged nearly 350% in this country. These statistics are horrific. The IRA definition of anti-Semitism has broad consensus and is supported by the majority of mainstream Jewish organizations, including the Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta and American Jewish Committee. Not to mention that this definition has already been adopted by 31 states and counting. It is time for Georgia to pass HB 30. Surround yourself with people who fight for you in rooms you're not in. You know, as a woman and as a woman of color, that quote resonates with me. Depending on the room and the circumstance, I have been lucky that people have fought for me. But I also know what it feels like when people haven't. And one of the most painful feelings is when you come to realize that people who you thought would show up for you didn't. Too many of us understand that hurt. So while there is no Jewish member of this chamber at this important moment, I want the Jewish community to know that you are not alone. And in this room, you can always count on me to fight for Jewish Georgians. My colleagues, won't you join me by voting yes on HB 30? Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. I recognize the senator from 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. On Monday or Tuesday, forget the day when we voted this out of committee, I was a yes vote out of committee. But there were still some things that actually concerned me about this bill. And I kept having to wrestle with it, and so I decided to wrestle with it from the standpoint of being a former prosecutor. And so therefore, I won't be as passionate as normally I am. I'm going to be a little bit more clinical in how I approach this, because I think it's important to do it that way. So when we talk about the bill from the standpoint of a prosecutor, first thing that comes to my mind is line 27 in this particular bill, which says the state, the government, shall consider the definition of anti-Semitism for determining whether such penalty enhancement is authorized. And then we go to the hate crime statute. Hate crime, of course, is where a person intentionally selects a person because of their race, color, religion, national origin, or others. And when you do that, when you go to the hate crime statute, the judge or the prosecutor, when they do the penalty enhancement, must describe, basically, the prosecutor has to describe why he's going to go for the penalty enhancement, and the judge doing his penalty enhancement has to basically say, this is why I'm enhancing the penalty. So what was giving me concern was not really the majority of this definition, and I'll get to that. And it's what we talked about in the amendment, which is 7 and 8 for me. I think others have mentioned others, but it was 7 and 8 because at that point in time, and I 100% get it, I know exactly how the hate crime will work. Let's just deal with what I used to deal with. Misdemeanor, person get into a fight, person punch him in the face, and during that, they say something that fits 7 and 8. That then would qualify potentially for a potential penalty enhancement. So it's correct. It's not just that you do X and therefore you get a penalty enhancement. It has to be something else, and basically it's violence. So you hit somebody. Let's just deal with the misdemeanor aspect of it. Felonies are good, but I mean, you got a felony, you're going to jail regardless. So you get into the fight, and you say something dealing with 7 and 8, and so you go to the prosecutor's office, because this is how it would work, And you say, I think this was a hate crime because we got into this argument, we got into this fight. Yes, it's physical violence. The other person is obviously the at-fault person. They're going to be the defendant. But it's a hate crime because they talked about the things that are in 7 and 8. And that then now says to the prosecutor, because we're making this bill, he could take this into consideration anyway, and I'll get back to that. But now the prosecutor, in his statement to the defendant, and then the judge later would actually be citing a reason to do a penalty enhancement critique of another nation. That's a heck of a thing. That's a heck of a thing, because I would dare say that if you had the other factors that have been kind of insinuated, if you had persons using the other factors that are in, you wouldn't need 7 and 8. So if you got somebody punching somebody in the face and then they also were saying certain things that we all kind of know about and which in the other examples, that fits. That fits because it goes to persons as human beings, it goes to persons as individuals. That's 100% accurate. Those things go to persons as an individual. All the other examples go to people as individuals. There's no issue with that necessarily. The issue is when the prosecutor, the arm of the state, the judge, an arm of a state, says, I'm penalty enhancing you because of what you said about another nation. Yes, you fought the person, we got that, we had a fight, we got that part, but the penalty enhancement is going to come because of what you said about another nation. That is a heck of a statement. It's not by itself. I understand. I've already said now they had a fight. So don't nobody come up here and say, well, it's more than that. I've already acknowledged that. But what I'm saying is the enhancement is coming about because of what was said about another nation. I agree that the enhancement will come about. We all agree. Those who voted for hate crime already have acknowledged that we agree that enhancement should come about if you talk about somebody from a standpoint of their individuality and them being a human being. We've already established that. This is different. This is enhancing because of what you said about a nation. That's a heck of a thing. That was the first thing that was really giving me a lot of pause here, was that that's how this would go down. Prosecutor write the defendant, and that probably be the determining factor. I dare say if he had all those other factors, if he had the other 8 or 9 factors that exist, he may not even put down 7 or 8. Because those factors speak to a person as a human being, as a person. That's going to be much easier to prove, even for a jury. The jury said, I understand that. They said that about you as a person. They insinuated that about you as a person. I get that. Let's enhance punishment. But as a nation, that's different. But let's take it, let's assume you took 7 and 8 out. Let's take it a step further. As I stated, no doubt, the rest of the examples, to some extent, there may be a debate. Number 9 is probably a mixture of nation and individuality. But let's just deal with the rest of them. No doubt they basically attack somebody as a human being. How would the normal hate crime be proven? You go to the prosecutor's office and you would say, yeah, we got into a fight, but this is why it's a hate crime. If it's African American, you could say he used the N-word. It's a hate crime. You would make that prosecutor understand why this is a hate crime. What we're doing basically with the other examples is providing a roadmap for prosecutors to follow. That's what you're actually doing. It's not mandating that a person enhance the penalty. You're providing a roadmap for persons to follow. But check this out. No other person has a roadmap. No other person, no other group gets the roadmap. We're creating this roadmap for the prosecutor to follow. It's the same roadmap he really would follow informally, because the person would come to his office and say, this is why it's a hate crime because of these factors. And the prosecutor uses training and experience and knowledge, and he would say, I agree with you and I can prove it. I have to figure out a way to get this into evidence, and we can make this a penalty enhancement. What we're doing today is we're actually putting in writing and codifying the roadmap for the prosecutor to follow. But we're not doing it for everybody. And now the question becomes, is that part right? Now the question becomes, is that part right? Shouldn't everyone have a roadmap? Why only one? Because that roadmap is actually stronger than just a roadmap. That roadmap is actually an imprint of legitimacy from us. It's a little bit stronger than just a roadmap. It's actually an imprint of legitimacy from the legislature. And certainly the prosecutor is going to look at that and say, the legislature says, I shall look at these factors. It's going to carry more weight. If anybody comes up and argue that it doesn't carry more weight, then why are we even passing the bill? If someone's going to come up and argue and say, oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah, we did this shall. The prosecutor's going to read it. Ain't no big deal. Then why are we doing this? Then you are being disingenuous to everyone that you promised this bill for. You want it to carry more weight. That's why you're doing it. That's fine. But the question becomes, should other persons also have this roadmap, this imprint that we're putting on it? And here's the catch. Because if they don't get it, the question becomes, are we picking and choosing? And guess what? This bill already picked and chose. See, the IRA definition is interesting. It's more than just anti-Semitism. It actually has two definitions. One deals with anti-Semitism, and one of the things, because as I go through this, I don't really want to pit nationalities and persons against each other. You guys got your phone, pull it up, and you'll see it. It's from IRA. It deals with the Holocaust. It's actually two separate definitions with two separate set of examples. One deals with anti-Semitism, and another deals with another group. And you can look it up and see. Both are from IRA. It's not two separate things. Both have used the same metrics. Both have used the same organization. Both come from the same event, which was the Holocaust. We are not addressing both, which is not surprising because those same persons were ignored when we talked about doing restitution for Nazi Germany. They also were ignored at that time too. That's when I really started getting a pause when we start saying, are we going to pick and choose? I don't know if it's done on purpose. I doubt it, but we get caught up. But right there in that definition, there are two groups that are actually talked about in IRA. I'm not talking about another group somewhere. In that definition, by that organization concerning the same event. And we did not cover both. We're already picking and choosing. And so therefore, we already know we've done that now. We've already done one set of picking and choosing. So now let's look at it from a standpoint of other situations. So we already know from IRA itself, same organization, same metrics, same horrible incident, same dealings. Didn't put both in. Well, I'm trying to stay away from the geopolitical aspect of this, but we know that also there's questions about Islam and Christianity and Judaism. Well, the Biden administration, but beyond that, just sent out an edict talking about the fact that they want to do something on Islamophobia. Islamophobia is actually something that has the definitions and examples, not through IRA, but it's gone through a rigorous process, just like this has. It's been around since 1997. Columbia Law Review article for one. I'm not picking out just little articles here and there. You can go look at it. These are law review articles that have talked about this. This isn't some just newspaper article. They have wrestled with this. They have put Islamophobia on the same kind of metrics and really hit hard on it, and they've come up with their own definitions, and they've also come up with their examples. Are we willing and prepared to also use a roadmap, a written roadmap for that? We weren't even written and prepared to use a written roadmap for a group that's in IRA. And now you start seeing where we're heading. So we have two different groups within the same document. One is in, one is out. Now we have another group that has gone through similar kind of really, robust kind of looking at the facts and saying, this is how we come up with this definition with these examples, not just a newspaper article and somebody with an opinion, going through law review articles, etc. And they said, we've created this definition in these examples. And all I'm asking is, are we willing to do that roadmap, that imprint on everything? And if we're not, that becomes problematic from a legal standpoint. Not a moral standpoint, but from a legal standpoint. And then start looking at immigrant groups, because you really start seeing the rabbit hole that you're going down, but it's just as serious. These are serious things. Go and look at different immigrant groups and law review articles based on them. One I found was dealing with Somalis. And to them, it's important. To you, I guess, or maybe to me, we don't deal with that population necessarily, so maybe lies, you know. But they have all kind of ethnic strife. Somali population is growing in the United States, growing in Georgia, especially in Atlanta. And they actually have words that they say to each other, which would be ethnic hate crime against each other. And guess what? They could prove it. They could. What would happen is you would have a person of that ethnic background would get beat up, would go into a fight. We understand that. They had a fight. They'd go to the prosecutor's office, and the prosecutor would say, I just thought this was just a fight between two guys from Somalia. What are you talking about, hate crime? Let me explain to you. See, he used this particular term about me. He used this particular term about me. And within our culture, these things mean this. And the prosecutor may say, you know what? I now understand what you're saying. I think I might be able to sell that to the jury. That's how it works. That's how it should work. Absolutely. That's how it should work, and that is how it works. 100%. That's why we pass hate crime. That's why some people oppose it and say, well, wait a minute, you're opposing speech. We're beyond that now. But that's exactly how it would work. That person would go into the process right now today. They don't need definitions for this. They don't need this bill. They're going to go to the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor's going to say, well, I didn't really know what was going on. I just thought it was two Somalis fighting each other. No. You have to understand in our culture it means this, this, and this, and this is ethnic cleansing to some extent, and this is what's going on, and you teach the prosecutor. And you would teach them about the same thing with race. We think we know everything about race, but you would have to teach them about that. You would have to teach them about religion. This bill eliminates the teaching process and says, we're not going to create the roadmap. And the only question becomes, are you willing to create the roadmap for everyone else? Maybe we are, but if you're not, I think you have a problem legally and possibly morally. But that's where you are. And right now, I don't know if the will of this legislature is to do that, to do a roadmap for all the different variables that could take place. And there may be, not only because it's any type of ism, racism, sexism, whatever it may be, it may just be, that's just too much in the weeds to get into, and we want to give prosecutors discretion. Absolutely. It may just be that. Doesn't have to be a sinister reason, but the bottom line is you're still picking and choosing, even if the reason is, look, we don't want to burden prosecutors with all these different definitions. I get it, but you're still picking and choosing. You just are. And the fact of the matter is the law exists, and what, to me, the better route would be to make sure we have total training. We could use examples. I still wouldn't want to use 7 and 8. Have total training of our officers, our state agencies, on all of these different variables. Because you know what else? We know how that training works, because that training worked in the area of DUI. When I graduated many, many years ago, DUI was 0.12, and that is not 2 beers. And it took an education process for even prosecutors to realize this is serious, because it was 0.12, it was 0.15, and back in those days, the officers, yeah, just go home. But all of us learned. And then the legislature started learning and took it down to 0.10, took it down to 0.08, and our roads were safer. But that was a learning process. We didn't have definitions. Domestic violence, for instance, we learned. We learned that giving the flowers after somebody gets into a fight, that was not love, that was power control. That was something the prosecutor had to learn. We learned it through training, we learned it through experience. We learned it, and we prosecuted those cases better. We learned that saying I love you after a fight was not about love, it was about violence and control. We learned it. The legislature didn't put a roadmap and say, okay, if they say I love you after the first fight, it's this. If they say I love you after the second fight, it's this. No, they said this is domestic violence, and you prosecutors are going to have to learn what it is. And I have faith that our prosecutors and our defense, and I'm just using that, I know it applies to other agencies too, but I have faith that they will learn what true anti-Semitism is. If they don't know now, if you get into a fight that is how to be penalty enhanced, they will learn it. But they also will learn Islamophobia. They also will learn the situation about the Somalia. They will learn all of those things, and they will become better at their job. But unless we're willing to do it for all the different groups who have gone through different metrics, who have gone through rigorous analysis and come up with their own definitions and their own examples, if we're not willing to do that for whatever reason, then we can't start this process now. And we've already shown we weren't willing to do it. Because we took a definition which had two different groups staring us in the face, and whether it was because of negligence or whatever, we left one group out. The exact same event, the exact same type of discrimination, we left a group out. So we've already shown that we're not willing to do it. And we can't do this picking and choosing. Trust that we can do the education we did in DV. Trust we can do the education we did with the DUI. Trust that we did the education we did in the United States, period, to improve race relations. Trust. We will be a better society for it. Thank you, and I yield the well.
Recognize the senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. You know, a couple of years ago when I became chairman of the Judiciary Committee, I felt like I had some big shoes to fill. Felt a little bit of pressure about it. The former chairman, like the chairman of the committee I served in the House, would have these really long, exciting hearings. Nobody really wanted to go to those committee hearings because all of us lawyers will sit there and pick through every single word and dot every single I and cross every single T, and it just went on and on, kind of like the debate on the floor of the Senate this morning in some ways. But as a lawyer, we're trained to believe that words matter. What we put on paper matters a lot, and we always feel this obligation with every bill to go through every single line because that's what we're trained to do. And for that reason, for the last year, the Senate Judiciary Committee has been considering this bill. We struggled last year with how to put these words into a bill, how to define hate. How do you put hate into words? And after a year of this, I'm proud of, as others have alluded to, the unanimous vote that this committee took this past Monday night as we sat for hours looking at this again and got this bill out of committee. But what I've realized is while every single word matters, sometimes you got to step back and look at what you're actually doing with the bill and how this law actually applies. You can continue to say anything you want to say in this state. You can continue to give hateful speeches. You can say bad things about other people. You can talk about how bad a country's policy is on the other side of this world. You can do that every single day. This bill still protects that. If you look at the language of the bill, lines 29 through 34, confirms again the constitutional protections. So somebody gets up here and says, the Constitution protects this. Well, the bill still says that. Here's what you can't do. You can't then use that, use your words, and then go hit somebody in the face because you don't like what their country stands for. You can't go assault somebody, target them, because you don't like what a country on the other side of the world is doing. And by the way, you also can't go discriminate against them. You can't keep them from having housing, from having a job, because you don't like something that the country you think they identify with is doing. That in this bill will be illegal. That is what you're voting today to outlaw in our state. When we had the hate crimes bill in the summer of 2020, yes, the summer of 2020, because if you remember, we came back in the middle of COVID and came back into session and passed that bill. There were people that said you can't legislate away hate. You can't put words on paper to define hate. You can't pass a bill that's going to stop hate. And I don't disagree with that. We can't stop hate. But in the summer of 2020, after what we saw played out on national TV that happened in our state, we came together as a body and said, we can't legislate it away, but we can make sure everybody knows we don't stand for it in Georgia. With this bill today, we can't stop what's happening around this world. We can't stop the hate that's happening in some of our backyards. But we sure can stand up as a body and say in Georgia, we're not going to stand for it. Now, briefly, Mr. President, I want to mention the amendment. Amendment 1 sounds great. The language there I can't disagree with. That should be in the bill. Here's the problem with the amendment. It already is in the bill. This language comes exactly from the IRA definition. On line 2 of the examples starts this very quote. So we don't need this amendment. And I'm hoping that the author of the amendment will withdraw it, because if you really want that language in the law, you'll allow it to stand in its place as it's written in the code and in the examples that we have, and you won't pull one section out without pulling all of it out. I think this is very important language. It should be interpreted in the definition that's already in place. So, Mr. President, I ask everyone to support House Bill 30 and oppose the First Amendment.
Thank you, Senator. Recognize the Senator from the 50th.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I was asked by the Judiciary Chairman to clarify he is not asking us to oppose the First Amendment. It is the First Amendment to this bill. So, well, thank you. I rise. Some of the topics that I was going to hit on, the Judiciary Chairman did hit on, but I want to try to depoliticize this bill for those in the chamber that may be confused as to what it does after the debate that we've heard today. The hate crime bill, which is OCGA 1710-17, states if you commit one of these 5 crimes, simple assault, simple battery, criminal trespass, or misdemeanor, then you're charged with those if the trier of fact, the judge, the jury, determines beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, the person who committed the crime, intentionally selected their victim or group of victims or any property owned by them as the object of the offense because of their actual or perceived race, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender, mental disability, or physical disability. Then you get these enhanced penalties. So what does that mean? As the Judiciary Chairman stated, this does not chill speech. This is not an anti-speech bill. You can still say whatever you want to under the color of the law. But then if you say these things and have a certain belief, target someone or a group of individuals, then it's a crime. Then it's a hate crime. And what we have the hate crime statute in the state of Georgia, but with the IRA definition, this helps clarify for those who are trying to enforce this law, what does it mean to be Jewish? What is anti-Semitic? And I think that this definition is going to help, and we have heard that this is going to help law enforcement, this is going to help prosecutors, help define what they are allowed to do and what they are not allowed to do when adding these enhancements. This is a good bill, and I hope you support it. Despite the political ramifications surrounding the bill and those who have come up to speak against it, I ask for your support on this bill. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Thank you, Senator. Senator from the 40th. This looks like, Senator from the 18th, this looks like the last speaker unless somebody else comes forward. So be on deck to close debate after this. Looks like the last speaker before closing debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. To my colleagues in the Senate, this is my 12th year in this Georgia General Assembly. 6 years were in the other chamber, then I left for 14 years, and then I came back to this chamber, and it's the 6th year in this chamber. And looking back at all those years, I think I can honestly say that I have struggled more with this bill than any other bill that I have voted on in those 12 years. I've stood in front of you and I've told you the horrible story of the flyers, those awful flyers, nasty, ugly, mean, hateful flyers that were thrown into the driveways of the North Atlanta suburbs in my district, to driveways of my friends. We stood together against that. I stood in front of you this session and told you such a sad story about a family who lost their daughter protecting Israel just last November. We grieved together as a body about that. One evening, it was late, I went down to my office and found my office mate upset, the senator from the 5th, because he had been receiving so many phone calls from people saying, how could he possibly be a senator to represent his district because he's a Muslim? So how can he possibly represent people as a senator? I bet you didn't know that. Then I went home that night and I turned on the news and there was Gaza and those horrible images of those people dying in rubble, children. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And all of those hurts I feel. But my heart has many rooms. I can hold all that pain for these different groups at the same time. I have looked at this bill up and down, and the definition, up and down, to the left and the right. I have had conversations with legislative counsel about some of my legal concerns about the bill. But this whole time, I just kept feeling like something was missing. And the senator from the 22nd actually got to the same conclusion that I got to. He got to it as a lawyer. I'm a social worker, so I'm kind of a healer kind of person, so I got to it through my heart. And that's that if we're going to define anti-Semitism in the law, then there are a lot of other groups that experience racism that they should also have definitions and explanations of what racism looks like. Definitely, we should have what the senator referred to as a roadmap for Islamophobia. We should have definitions for people in the LGBT community. We should have definitions for our indigenous people. And then there was one thing I thought of, we should have definitions for racism against black people. And there was one thing that I thought of that really, really bothered me. And that's that in the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, it says that if you state that you deny that the Holocaust happened, then that's anti-Semitism. Absolutely. But we passed a bill 2 years ago that said that things that make white children uncomfortable in the classroom shouldn't be taught. And there are a lot of teachers who are now interpreting that to mean that they can't teach that slavery existed. So how can we pass that bill 2 years ago that makes people feel like they can't teach about slavery and then pass a bill saying that denial of the Holocaust is anti-Semitism? That doesn't seem congruent to me. So if we had two bills today, if we had this bill, HB 30, that defines anti-Semitism, and we also had a bill that defines Islamophobia, I would feel so much more at peace. And we had an opportunity over in the House. We have the only Jewish member in the House, and we have the only Palestinian member in the House. And I think they did try to talk to each other, but what if it had turned out differently? What if they had talked to each other and decided that we needed both bills? Then would I have had the people in the hallway at the ropes today who were telling me they didn't feel heard or understood or protected? I think that we could have come together if we had seen both sides. And so I agree with the senator from the 22nd. We're missing something today. And this partial action that we're taking isn't going to eliminate hate, which I think all of us in this chamber, that's what we want. We will not eliminate hate until we learn to listen to one another. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. Recognize the Senator for the 18th to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've been here a long time. We've heard a lot said today. I'm going to try not to take too much more of your time, but a few things I do want to share. First of all, I want to thank those of you that have spoken in favor of this bill. I want to thank the minority leader for her moving speech and her view on this. I want to thank the senator from the 8th who gave an incredibly moving personal story of why this is important for him to be here today. And for those of you that will vote yes on this bill, I want to thank you on behalf of the vulnerable, pleading, begging Jewish community in our state who just want to be safe. Thank you for making a step today in that direction by voting yes. Let me address briefly the amendment offered by the senator from the 9th. First of all, and I want to thank the Judiciary Chairman who made some of these great points. The suggestion that somehow this is an anti-speech bill is not just nonsensical, it is a failure to read the bill and a failure to understand what this bill does. Why? Because as was pointed out, the actual very verbiage in the amendment is contained within the IHRA definition that this bill references. And I quote, "Criticism of Israel similar to that leveled against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic." So what would be the motivation of lifting that exact language that's already in the bill and try to get you to vote on it as an amendment? Well, there's no value in that. There's no purpose, no legitimate purpose. So it's clearly not needed. Second, the root of this is somehow this concern that our First Amendment rights are implicated. Well, let's look at the bill that you have before you. When you look on line 29, it says, and I quote, "Nothing in this code section," that is the substitute I'm asking you to vote for today, "nothing in this code section shall be construed to diminish or infringe upon any right protected under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution or the Georgia Constitution." So we clearly don't need the amendment for that because there's an absolute built-in, baked-in, guaranteed protection that nothing about this bill will infringe upon anybody's rights that we all enjoy under the First Amendment of the Constitution. Third, as my friend from the 50th said and made a great point, if you want to go out and say that you hate Israel after this bill is passed, you may absolutely do that. But if you want to commit a crime, you got a problem. If you commit a crime, as he identified, under the hate crime statute, you got a problem. And if you happen to commit one of those crimes while spewing anti-Semitic speech, you might just subject yourself to the hate crime statute. Folks, that's all this bill does. That's all it does. And all of this baseless rhetoric about it's somehow chills speech and you can't criticize Israel, that is nowhere in anything I'm asking you to vote on. Specifically, I would ask, what provision in the bill that you have before you triggers any criminal penalty if somebody speaks out against Israel? It doesn't. It's not in there. Which is why I would submit to you why the senator who offered this amendment didn't give you any quotes from the bill, didn't give you specific references or paragraphs or line numbers saying, here's the problem. Let's look at this earnestly and honestly. Here's the issue of where free speech is chilled, why you can't say these things if we pass this bill. Those quotes weren't given to you because they're not in there. It's not in the bill to which she referenced. You know, we get the honor of coming here and handling a lot of issues, some sort of mundane administrative things, but sometimes, on rare occasions, we get the opportunity to protect the vulnerable of this state from evil. We don't get to do that every day, but we do today. This bill is needed. If you're a part of the committee or if you watched it and you heard during the time allotted the people from the Jewish community and others that came and talked about what the Jewish community is subjected to on a regular basis, you know this bill is needed. The Jewish community of our state are crying out for this and have been for some time. One of the most poignant moments of the committee hearing was when the gentleman came and he talked about the impact of what is going on in the Atlanta area of some Jewish schools and the fact that his children can't get transported to their schools safely. Not just veiled threats, but direct threats of violence and attempted violence and sometimes successful violence against our Jewish neighbors. And he said, I quote, "We just want our children to be safe." Who in this room that God has blessed with a child doesn't want your child to be safe? I pray that mine are. I know that you pray that yours are, regardless of to which God you're praying. You want your children to be safe. As we talked about in some of the questions about, well, wait a minute, shouldn't we tweak the definition? Shouldn't it be different? Listen, this is a room full of intelligent, educated people. We know that the Jewish community is comprised differently. And because of that, because of the historical nature, because of all of those issues that we know, that we've already talked about, it's harder to define anti-Semitism. And while some want to criticize this definition that we have, that we've contained, I took those criticisms from last March about, is this the right way to go? Is this the perfect definition? Is this the one that ought to be used? Some of those same arguments you're hearing this morning, or now we're in the afternoon. But I'll tell you what I just came to conclude. I couldn't figure out why I somehow could be smarter than all the people around this country, including our federal government, and all the countries in the world that have ascribed to this very definition, that somehow I was so smart I could come up with a better one. Well, folks, I ain't. I'm not that smart. This is the definition that should be used, and there's a reason it's been used by so many other states and other countries. So, my dear friends, this is in your hands today. I beg you to ask yourself, where will we leave the Jewish community if we don't pass this bill? They will be without a way for us to address that which everyone in this room agrees is wrong, but no way to address it. Because if our state can't define it, we can't provide them the protection. So, if not us, who? If not you, who? If not now, when? And if not today on this vote, win. I ask you to please vote for this. It's the right thing for the Jewish community. It's the right thing for the Georgia Senate. It's the right thing for the people of Georgia. Please vote yes. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. Senator has closed debate. Now we're in a posture of taking up the amendment authored by the senator from the 9th. On Amendment 1, is there objection to the amendment? We have objection. We're just going to go ahead and put it up on the board, if that's all right. All those in favor of the amendment will vote yea. All those opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the 36th, for what purpose do you rise? You waive. On the adoption of the amendment, the yeas are 15 and the nays are 36, and this amendment has failed. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. All those opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 44 and the nays are 6. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. I understand the excitement, but I want to take this time and I want to give the pro tem, I want to congratulate him on a job well done. Good job today. Let's give him a round of applause. I want to thank like to thank the chairman of Judiciary. I also like to thank the members of the majority and the minority caucus for working together on this. I've got these two representatives up here with me right now. This is not a normal scenario here to have two representatives standing up here, both from opposite, one Republican, one Democrat. We have our author, Representative Carson, and also Representative Panchis, Panich, excuse me, Representative. And I just want to thank them. They worked very hard this last year, and I can tell you that, you know, sometimes these chambers have, you know, disagreements, and we usually try to work them out. But I will tell you, they were very passionate about this, and I just appreciate them being so passionate, but also so patient. And I also want to say what really moved me, obviously, after October 7th, the tragic event that happened there in Israel. What moved me is people I went to school with, the school I graduated from in high school, where we had a large contingency of Jewish students. I'd been to bar mitzvahs, I'd been to Hanukkahs, I'd been to Yom Kippurs through the years, I'd been to Jewish weddings. And when I saw them, friends that I've known since I was 14 years old, coming to me asking about this legislation and asking about this bill, and you could see the pain in their eyes because it hit home, the things that happened on October 7th, and it was a real sobering reminder of the history and the struggles the Jewish community has gone through, not just in this country, but throughout the world and history. So this is a big day, it's a big event, and I want to thank everyone who was involved with it, and I want to thank these two House members for being a part of it. And thank you for being so patient today. So thank y'all very much. Yep. Recognize the majority leader for a motion.
What a great day to be in Georgia. Mr. President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned.
Oh, whoa. You're out of order. Recognize the pro tem.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate immediately transmit HB 30 to the House.
The pro tem has moved that the HB 30 be immediately transferred to the House. Is there objection? Without objection, the motion is granted. Good job again, Senator. We got one more thing to take up here. No? Do it? The resolution? I tell you what, let's just take it up tomorrow. It's been a long day. I'm ready for the motion there, Senator.
Thank you. We'll try it again. Mr. President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 9 a.m. That's 9 a.m. Friday, January the 26th.
All right, the majority leaders move that the Senate stand adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Secretary, read the announcements.
The Rules Committee will meet immediately upon adjournment today in 4:50. The Retirement Committee will meet in 310 of the CLOB at 2 o'clock. The Regulated Industries and Utilities Committee will meet in 4:50 at 3 o'clock. The Public Safety Committee will meet in 4:50 at 4 o'clock. The Urban Affairs Committee will meet in 4:50 at 5 p.m. The State and Local Governmental Operations Committee will meet in 125 at 5 p.m. And the Judiciary Committee will meet in 307 of the CLOB at 5 p.m. The Children and Families Committee meeting has been canceled for today. That completes the order, Mr. President.
All right, we got a motion on the floor to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes clearly have it. We're adjourned. See you in the morning.